The digital numbers on the ATM screen glowed with a cruel, indifferent green. Balance, $7. 14. My breath hitched in my chest. A cold wave washed over me, making the mild autumn air feel like a slap of ice. It had to be a mistake, a glitch, some kind of system error. I fumbled for the receipt button, my fingers trembling so badly it took 3 tries to press it. The machine whirred, spitting out a thin slip of paper that confirmed the nightmare. $32. $450 had vanished. All that remained was $7. 14. Just yesterday, I had checked it online. I knew the exact amount because I watched it grow every week. A little green shoot of a number that represented 5 years of my life. 5 years of double shifts at the pediatric ward, of packing lunches instead of buying them, of saying no to vacations and new clothes. It was our down payment, our future, the little brick house with the blue door we'd bookmarked on Zillow. It was all there, safe in my personal savings account, an account I had insisted on keeping separate when David and I got married. It was my discipline, my sacrifice, and now it was gone. Every rational thought flew out of my head, replaced by a single, screaming question, how? A thick fog of panic enveloped me, and through it, one face emerged with chilling clarity. My mother-in-law, Brenda. A shiver, completely unrelated to the cold, traced its way down my spine. The memory of her smiling face, her seemingly innocent questions, her constant presence, suddenly felt sinister. The world tilted. The cheerful sounds of the Philadelphia suburb street a distant siren. Kids laughing in a nearby park faded into a dull roar. All I could see was that number. $7. 14. The price of a cup of coffee and a pastry. The remains of a dream that had been meticulously built. And then, in an instant, demolished. My knees felt weak, and I gripped the side of the ATM to steady myself. The story didn't start here, with this devastating emptiness. It started 3 weeks ago, at a Sunday dinner that I should have known was the beginning of the end. 3 weeks earlier, the scent of roasted chicken and rosemary filled Brenda's kitchen. It was a warm, comforting smell that felt like a lie. I stood over the stove, stirring gravy, feeling the familiar tension settle in my shoulders. Sunday dinners at my mother-in-law's house were a mandatory tradition, and they always felt less like a family gathering and more like a performance evaluation. Amy, honey, you need more salt in this. It's bland. I forced a tight smile, gripping the wooden spoon. I was trying to watch David's sodium. Brenda. His blood pressure was a little high at his last checkup. Brenda waved a dismissive hand, her collection of silver bracelets clinking together like a tiny, irritating alarm. Nonsense. A man David's age needs flavor, not rabbit food. My son works hard. He deserves a good, hearty meal. She bustled past me, grabbing the salt shaker and giving it 3 vigorous shakes over the pot before I could protest. She stirred it once, tasted it with a dramatic flourish, and nodded. There. Perfect. Of course. It was. Everything she did was perfect. Everything I did needed her correcting touch. For 2 years, this had been our silent dance. She'd rearrange the throw pillows I'd just fluffed, wipe a microscopic speck of dust from a surface I'd just cleaned. Or, her personal favorite, fix my cooking. It was her way of reminding me that this was her house, her son, her world. I was just visiting. From the living room, I could hear the low murmur of the football game on TV, punctuated by laughter from David and his younger brother, Kevin. David, my sweet, kind David, was a man who saw the world in logical, predictable code. As a software engineer, he could solve the most complex digital problems, but he was completely blind to the unspoken language of family dynamics. To him, these dinners were about family, tradition, a welcome break. To me, they felt like walking through a minefield in high heels. Kevin, at 25, was a permanent fixture on his mother's couch. He'd lost another job last month this time at a warehouse for creative differences, which was Kevin's code for I showed up late too many times. He'd moved back in with Brenda immediately, his presence casting a permanent shadow of arrested development over the house. He possessed a special kind of talent for making his lack of ambition feel like someone else's fault. "Dinner's ready," I called out, my voice a little too bright. David came into the small dining room first, his face lit with that easy smile that had made me fall in love with him. He wrapped his arms around me and gave me a quick kiss. "Smells amazing, Ames," he said, completely unaware of the salt-laced tension hanging in the air. He squeezed my hand, his touch a brief moment of reassurance before he took his seat. Kevin slumped into a chair across from me, his eyes already glued to his phone. He grunted a hello, which was the most conversation I usually got out of him. We sat down, the familiar floral patterned plates a stark contrast to the simmering resentment I was trying to swallow along with my chicken. For a few minutes, the only sounds were the scraping of forks and Brenda's little sighs of approval at her own doctored gravy. I watched David, hoping to catch his eye, hoping for a silent acknowledgement that this was difficult for me too. But he was focused on his plate, happily eating the meal his mother had saved. It was the quiet moments that were the worst. The silences gave Brenda time to observe, to find new faults, new ways to needle me. I decided to break it first, to steer the conversation toward something neutral. "So, Kevin," I started, trying to inject some genuine warmth into my voice. "Any luck with the job search?" Kevin shrugged, his thumbs flying across his phone screen. "It's tough out there," he mumbled. "Everything's a joke. They want 5 years of experience for an entry-level job." "There are plenty of good jobs," Brenda said, jumping to his defense. "The problem is, you need a car to get to them. The good factories, the warehouses, they're not on the bus line. He can't get anywhere." I saw a familiar glint in Brenda's eyes, and a sense of dread settled in my stomach. I knew that look. It was her brilliant idea look, the one that always preceded a suggestion that would benefit her or Kevin, usually at our expense. It was the same look she'd had when she suggested we pay for Kevin's new laptop last year, or cover his cell phone bill just for a few months. David nodded thoughtfully, chewing his food. "Yeah, the bus routes around here aren't great." "That's a fair point." I stayed silent, focusing on cutting my roast beef into unnecessarily small pieces. I could feel where this was going. It was a well-rehearsed play, and I was about to be cast in the role of the unfeeling villain. Brenda placed her fork down, a carefully calculated move to draw all attention to her. She looked from David to me, her expression a perfect blend of maternal concern and steely resolve. It was the face of a martyr, a mother willing to do anything for her struggling child. "David, Amy," she said, her voice soft but firm, as if she were about to propose something deeply profound. "You two should buy Kevin a car." The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. I stopped chewing. I could feel David shifting uncomfortably beside me. Kevin, for the first time all evening, looked up from his phone, a flicker of greedy anticipation in his eyes. I stared at Brenda, waiting for the punchline. A joke, a misunderstanding. Surely, she wasn't serious, but her face was a mask of sincerity. She truly, genuinely expected us to spend thousands of dollars on her unemployed, 25-year-old son, a good used one. She continued, as if this were a perfectly reasonable concession. "Nothing fancy, just something reliable, something to get him on his feet. It's what family does. We lift each other up." The words hung in the air, a guilt-laden trap. If I said no, I wasn't just refusing to buy a car. I was refusing to be family. I was refusing to lift him up. I finally found my voice, but it was tight and brittle. "Brenda, we can't do that." Her smile faltered, just for a second. "What do you mean? You can't? David has a wonderful job. You're a nurse. For heaven's sake, you'd do just fine." "It's not about doing fine," I said, choosing my words carefully, trying to keep my tone even and respectful. This was a minefield. We have a budget. We have a goal. You know that. We're saving every single penny for a down payment on a house. The dream house. The little brick one with the blue door. David and I talked about it constantly. We had a picture of it taped to our fridge. A daily reminder of what we were working for. It was the why behind every extra shift I picked up, every night we stayed in and cooked instead of going out. Brenda knew this. She had even feigned enthusiasm, talking about how she couldn't wait to have grandchildren running around in the backyard. A backyard we didn't have yet. A house. Brenda scoffed, the word sounding like an insult. A frivolous luxury. You can wait on a house. My son's future can't wait. He's stuck. Can't you see that? This is about family. Amelia. Sometimes you have to make sacrifices for family. Her eyes bored into me, and the implication was as sharp as a shard of glass. I was not family. I was the selfish outsider, the dragon hoarding the gold that rightfully belonged to her kin. My dream was an obstacle to her son's needs. I looked at David, my eyes pleading with him. Say something. Please. Back me up. This is our dream. Not just mine. He just stared at his plate, his jaw tight. I could see the war playing out inside him, loyalty to his wife versus a lifetime of conditioning. To please his mother. He hated confrontation more than anything. I knew he was praying I would just handle it, that this would all go away. Mom. He finally mumbled, his voice weak. It's a lot of money. A car is, it's a big expense. Maybe we can talk about this later. There's nothing to talk about. Brenda's voice rose, sharp and accusatory. She turned her glare fully on me now. It's a simple question of priorities. Is your brother's well-being a priority? Or isn't it? Amelia, this is your fault. I'm just going to say it. Since you came into the picture, David has gotten so tight, so worried about every dollar. He was never like that before. He used to be generous. The accusation hung in the air, thick and suffocating. I was the corrupting influence, the greedy, money-grubbing wife who had turned her generous, perfect son into a miser. Kevin just watched the show, a smug little smirk playing on his lips. This was exactly what he wanted. His mother fighting his battles, making me the bad guy so he could remain the blameless victim. He wouldn't have to lift a finger. That was it. I couldn't sit there a moment longer, being dissected and blamed at a dinner table that was supposed to be about family. My chair scraped loudly against the wooden floor as I stood up. My hands were shaking, not with fear, but with a white-hot anger. I'm sorry, I said, my voice dangerously calm. But the answer is no. We are not buying Kevin a car. It's not happening. I turned and walked out of the dining room, grabbing my purse from the entryway table. I could hear Brenda's shrill voice following me. You see how she is, David. She has no respect, no sense of family. She's running the show, and you're just letting her. I didn't wait for David. I didn't look back. I walked out the front door, into the cool night air, and didn't stop until I reached the passenger side of our car. I slid into the seat, my heart hammering against my ribs. It wasn't just about the car. It never was. It was about the complete and utter lack of respect for me, for our marriage, for our future. In Brenda's eyes, our shared life was nothing more than a resource to be tapped for her other son. A few minutes later, David slid into the driver's seat. The silence in the car was a living thing, heavy and tense. He started the engine and pulled away from the curb without a word. You okay? He finally asked, his eyes fixed on the road. The question was so inadequate it was almost funny. No, David, I'm not okay, I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and hurt. Your mother just called me a selfish monster because I won't spend our life savings on your brother, who can't be bothered to hold down a job for more than a month. And you just sat there. What was I supposed to do? Amy, get into a screaming match with her at the dinner table? You were supposed to be my husband, I said, the words tumbling out. You were supposed to be my partner. You were supposed to say, Mom, Amy and I are a team. We make our financial decisions together, and our priority is building our future. But you didn't. You said nothing. You let me take all the fire. You handled it," he said quietly, as if that were a compliment. "You said no. I shouldn't have had to do it alone." I cried, the frustration finally boiling over into tears. "It's your family, David. They're your responsibility to manage. She doesn't see us as a team. She sees you, her perfect son, and me, the woman who is in her way. And tonight, by staying silent, you proved her right." He pulled into our apartment complex parking lot and cut the engine. The sudden silence was broken only by my ragged breathing. He finally turned to look at me, his face etched with a misery I knew was genuine. He wasn't a bad man. He was just a weak one when it came to his mother. "I'm sorry," he whispered, reaching for my hand. "You're right." I froze. I should have said more. I hate fighting. "I hate it too," I said, my anger deflating into a deep, weary sadness. "But sometimes you have to fight for things, David. For us. For that little brick house with the blue door." He squeezed my hand. "I know," he said. "We'll be okay. I'll talk to her tomorrow. I'll smooth things over." But as I looked into his kind, apologetic eyes, I knew he wouldn't. He would smooth things over, not fix them. He would placate his mother, not confront her. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this wasn't over. It was just the beginning. Brenda Hayes was not the type of woman to accept no for an answer. She would see my refusal not as a final decision, but as a declaration of war. And I had no idea just how dirty she was willing to play to win. David did not, in fact, smooth things over. The next morning, he acted as if the entire fight hadn't happened. He made coffee, chattered about a project at work, and kissed me goodbye with a casual cheerfulness that felt like a betrayal. He wanted to pretend it was a simple disagreement, a minor bump in the road. But I knew better. I felt the shift. It was a subtle crack in our foundation, the kind you ignore until the whole house starts to crumble. Brenda didn't call me. That wasn't her style. Direct confrontation was too honest. Instead, she began her campaign of quiet warfare, and her target was David. It started with the phone calls. They were relentless. I'd see David's phone light up with her name, and a weary, pained expression would cross his face before he answered. He'd walk into the other room, his voice a low, placating murmur, but I could still hear the snippets. "No, Mom, she's not mad. I know it's important. We're just trying to be careful. Please don't cry." He'd emerge from these calls looking drained, as if she had siphoned the life right out of him. He became distant, irritable. He'd stare at the TV without really seeing it, or scroll endlessly through his phone. The easy laughter that I loved, the way he'd pull me into a hug when I came home from a long shift, all of it began to fade. It was replaced by a heavy silence, thick with unspoken resentment. What did she want? I'd ask, trying to keep my voice neutral. Nothing. Just checking in. He'd lie, his eyes avoiding mine. He was trying to protect me from her, but what he was actually doing was protecting her from me. He was building a wall between us, brick by brick, with every secret phone call. She was pouring poison in his ear, a carefully crafted cocktail of sorrow and accusation, making him feel guilty for choosing me, for having his own life, his own dreams. And it was working. He started looking at our dream house picture on the fridge with a sort of pained longing, as if it were a symbol not of our future, but of the trouble I was causing in the present. About a week after the disastrous dinner, I came home from a grueling 12-hour shift at the hospital. My feet ached, my head pounded, and all I wanted was to collapse on the couch with a bowl of cereal and zone out. But when I opened the door to our apartment, I was hit with the aggressive scent of lemon cleaner and the sight of Brenda, humming as she folded our laundry on the living room floor. My heart seized in my chest. "Brenda, what are you doing here?" She looked up, her face arranged in a bright, benevolent smile. "Amelia, you're home early. I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd pop by and help you do out. You work so hard. I know how the chores can pile up." Her presence in our small apartment felt like an invasion. This was our sanctuary, the one place I could escape her judgment. And here she was, literally handling our underwear. It was a power move, a way of saying, I can enter your space whenever I want. Nothing is truly yours. David was still at work. She had a key. Of course, David had insisted she have one for emergencies. Right now, this felt like an emergency. That's really not necessary, I said, setting my bag down. We have a system. Oh, it's no trouble at all, she chirped, folding one of David's t-shirts with practiced precision. Besides, it gave me a chance to tidy up a bit. You had mail piling up on the counter. My eyes darted to the small table by the door where I kept our mail. The neat stack I'd left that morning was slightly askew, and sitting on top of the pile, separated from the junk mail and bills, was the monthly statement from my personal savings account, the one for the house, the one I never opened, because I just checked the balance online. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I knew, with absolute certainty, she had looked at it. She had snooped. She had crossed a line that was so clear and so sacred that I couldn't breathe for a second. I walked over and picked it up. Yes, well, I like to handle our own finances, I said, my voice sharp. Brenda's smile didn't waver, but her eyes turned to ice. Of course, dear, I was just organizing. It's shocking how much you've managed to put away. David was never much of a saver before he met you. It wasn't a compliment. It was the same accusation from dinner, repackaged with a sickly sweet smile. You control the money. You're making him cheap. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her to get out of my home, out of my life, and to never come back. But I was exhausted, and I knew it would just give her more ammunition to use against me with David. So I swallowed the rage and said, I'm really tired. Brenda, I think I'm just going to take a shower. You do that, sweetie, she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. You look exhausted. She left shortly after, leaving behind a sterile-smelling apartment and a simmering rage in my heart. When David came home an hour later, I confronted him. Your mother was here, I said, my voice shaking. She let herself in and went through our mail. She saw my bank statement. David, he sighed, running a hand through his hair. Amy, I'm sure she wasn't going through our mail. She was probably just cleaning. Like she said, don't you get it? It doesn't matter what her excuse was. This is our home, our private space. She can't just show up unannounced and start rummaging through our things. It's not okay. Okay, I'll talk to her, he said, but his tone was dismissive, like I was overreacting. I'll ask her to call first next time. This isn't about her calling first, I cried, my voice rising. This is about respect. It's about boundaries. She has none, and you refuse to enforce any. She's trying to drive a wedge between us, David, and you are handing her the hammer. That's when he snapped. You know what, Amy? Maybe you're the one causing the problem. My mother has been a part of my life for 32 years. She's lonely. She's just trying to be involved. Why does everything have to be a fight with you? Why can't you just give in a little? For the sake of peace. Is it really worth all this drama just to prove a point? The words hit me like a physical blow. Give in a little. For the sake of peace. He wasn't asking for a compromise. He was asking for my surrender. He wanted me to quietly accept the disrespect, the invasion of privacy, the constant undermining of our marriage, just so he wouldn't have to feel uncomfortable. He wanted me to sacrifice my peace of mind for his. In that moment, standing in the middle of our living room that still smelled of his mother's cleaning supplies, I felt a profound and terrifying sense of loneliness. I looked at the man I loved, the man I was building a future with, and I saw a stranger. I saw a man who was so terrified of his mother's disapproval that he was willing to let her dismantle our life. Piece by piece, the fight drained out of me, replaced by a cold, quiet clarity. This wasn't a battle I could win with him on the other side. He thought I was fighting his mother. He didn't understand that I was fighting for him, for us, and he was too blind, or too weak, to see the difference. You're right, I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. It's not worth the drama. I walked past him into our bedroom and shut the door. I didn't cry. I just lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the full weight of the situation settle over me. The argument about the car had been the opening shot. Brenda's invasion of our home was an escalation. But David's words, that was the true turning point. He hadn't just failed to defend me. He had sided with her. He had taken her narrative that I was difficult, that I was the problem, and thrown it in my face. I finally understood. I was alone in this. I was the sole guardian of our dream, of that little brick house with the blue door. And I was defending it not just from an overbearing mother-in-law, but from the weakness of my own husband. Brenda had declared war at that dinner table, and she wasn't just trying to get a car for Kevin. She was fighting for control over her son. And to her, I wasn't his wife. I was the enemy. And I knew, with a chilling certainty that settled deep in my bones, that she would stop at nothing to win. The 2 weeks that followed were a masterclass in psychological warfare. The open hostility of that Sunday dinner was gone, replaced by a cold war fought in the trenches of silence and manipulation. In our apartment, the air grew thin and brittle. David and I moved around each other like ghosts, the space between us charged with unspoken words. We still slept in the same bed, but we might as well have been on different continents. He'd keep to his edge, and I'd keep to mine. A chasm of resentment separating us. The easy intimacy we'd once shared, casual touches, the shared jokes, the goodnight kisses vanished. It was as if a vital wire connecting us had been severed, and neither of us knew how to fix it. David's phone became Brenda's primary weapon. It would buzz on the kitchen counter, her name flashing on the screen, and a shadow would pass over his face. He'd pick it up and retreat to the bedroom, closing the door softly behind him. But the walls were thin. I couldn't hear her words, but I could hear his, and they painted a damning picture. "Mom, please don't cry," he'd say, his voice weary. "It's not like that, no. Of course she doesn't hate you, we have a plan. That's all, Mom. I have to go." He'd emerge 10 minutes later looking 10 years older, the guilt she'd heaped on him weighing him down like a physical cloak. He wouldn't look at me. He'd just grab a beer from the fridge and sink into the couch, his eyes glued to the TV. Though I knew he wasn't watching it, the silence would stretch, thick and suffocating, until I couldn't bear it. What did she want? I'd ask, my voice hollow. Nothing. He'd mumble into his bottle. Just wanted to see how I was. The lie was so blatant it was insulting. She wasn't checking on him. She was poisoning him. She was painting me as a villain, a cold-hearted shrew who was hoarding his money and turning him against his own family. And David, my conflict-averse David, was letting her do it because it was easier than telling her to stop. Her campaign wasn't limited to him. She began targeting me in subtle, deniable ways. One afternoon, while I was at work, she called my personal cell phone. It was the first time she'd ever done that. I was in the middle of a busy shift, charting medications for a sick child. I almost ignored it. "Amelia, dear," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "I'm so sorry to bother you at work. I just had a quick question. Is everything okay?" I asked, a spike of alarm shooting through me. "Oh, yes, everything's fine. I was just talking to my friend Margaret about retirement planning. And you know, with my fixed income, I have to be so careful. It got me thinking. You're so smart with money. That bank you useth one, I saw the statement for the other dato, they have good interest rates." The question was so jarring, so transparently false, that I was stunned into silence. Brenda, who had never shown an ounce of interest in anything other than spending David's money, was suddenly asking about savings yields. I'm not sure. I stammered. "I haven't really compared." "Oh," she said, a note of disappointment in her voice. "Well, is it easy to manage your account online? I'm so terrible with computers. But everything is online these days, isn't it? You just need a username and a password for everything." A chill went down my spine. She was fishing. It was so obvious. yet so cleverly disguised as a harmless inquiry from a technologically inept old woman. She wanted to know how I accessed my money. My money, the account she now knew existed, and likely had a rough idea of the balance. It's pretty standard, I said, my voice turning to ice. Listen, Brenda, I'm really busy at work. I have to go. Of course, dear, we'll talk soon, she chirped, and hung up. I stood there by the nurse's station, the phone still pressed to my ear, my hand trembling. This was a new level of intrusion. She wasn't just trying to manipulate David anymore. She was probing my defenses, looking for a weakness, a way in. That night, I told David about the call. I explained how she had feigned interest in banking to ask about online access and passwords. I expected him to be shocked, to finally see the truth of her manipulative behavior. Instead, he just looked exhausted. Amy, she's 60 years old. She probably is terrible with computers. Maybe she was just making conversation. Conversation? David. She has never, not once, talked to me about finances unless it was to ask for something. She was digging for information. Can't you see that? What I see, he said, his voice rising with frustration, is that you've decided she's the enemy. So now everything she does, every word she says, is part of some grand conspiracy against you. She's my mother. She's not some criminal mastermind. Isn't she? I shot back. She's trying to steal our future. David, what do you call that? I call it a mother being worried about her loser son, he yelled, finally letting the dam of his frustration break. And maybe if we weren't so selfish, she wouldn't have to be. The word hung in the air between us. Selfish. He had used her word. The poison was working. In his mind, our dream, our discipline, our sacrifice site had all been twisted into an act of selfishness. The fight ended there. There was nothing left to say. He slept on the couch that night. The next morning, he left for work before I woke up. The crack in our foundation had become a chasm. I felt like I was standing on one side, and he was on the other, with his mother and brother, waving at me from a distance. A few more days of this unbearable silence passed. I changed my online banking password to something impossibly complex, a mix of letters, numbers, and symbols that even I had to write down. It was a small act of defiance, a way of reinforcing a wall that I felt was about to be breached. Then, one Friday evening, David came home and found me sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the picture of the little brick house with the blue door. I hadn't looked at it in days. It hurt too much. He didn't speak for a long time. He just stood in the doorway, watching me. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, stripped of all anger. It was the voice of a man who was utterly defeated. Amy, he said, please, I can't do this anymore. I looked up at him. His face was pale, with dark circles under his eyes. He looked broken. I can't live like this, he continued, his voice cracking. This silence, this anger, it's killing me. It's killing us. He walked over and sat down opposite me, his hands flat on the table. Let's just give her some money. My heart sank. David, no, we've been over this. Not for the car, he pleaded. Just something. A few thousand. 5,000. We'll call it a late birthday present for Kevin. A loan. Anything. We can tell her it's all we can spare. And that's the end of it. We just need to do something to get her off our backs. To make this stop, I'll work overtime. I'll pick up freelance projects. We can make it back. Please, Amy, I'm begging you. I looked into his eyes, and what I saw there terrified me. It wasn't just exhaustion. It was a willingness to do anything, to sacrifice any principle, just for a moment of peace. He was ready to surrender. He was waving the white flag, and I knew, with a gut-wrenching certainty, that if I gave in now, it would never be the end. It would be the beginning. It would teach Brenda that with enough pressure, she could break us. It would set a precedent that our boundaries were negotiable, that our future was for sale. I reached across the table and put my hand over his. His skin was cold. I love you, I said, my voice a whisper. But the answer is still no. It's not about the money anymore, David. It's about respect. It's about our life being ours. If we give her this, she will never, ever stop. We will never be free. He pulled his hand away as if mine had burned him. The light in his eyes died. All the desperation, all the pleading, vanished, replaced by a cold, hollow emptiness. He had made his last appeal, and I had denied him. Fine, he said, his voice flat. Have it your way. He stood up and walked into the bedroom, closing the door behind him. I knew what he was going to do. He was going to call his mother. He was going to tell her that he had tried, that he had failed, and that the selfish woman he married would not budge. I sat there at the table, staring at the picture of the blue door, and I felt a terror unlike anything I had ever known. I had held the line. I had protected our dream, but in doing so, I had pushed my husband away and given his mother the final piece of ammunition she needed. I had proven, in her eyes and now maybe in his, that I was the unreasonable one. I was the problem, and I had a sickening feeling that Brenda Hayes, having failed at manipulation, was about to try a more direct approach. I just never imagined how direct it would be. The world snapped back into focus with the jarring blare of a car horn. I was still standing by the ATM, the flimsy receipt clutched in my white-knuckled fist. The glowing green numbers $7.14 seemed to mock me. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the fog of my memory. This wasn't a nightmare. It wasn't a memory. It was real. It was happening right now. My first thought was David. He had to know. Maybe he'd done it. Maybe, in a moment of utter weakness, he had caved. He had begged me for $5,000, a peace offering to his mother. Maybe when I said no, he'd decided to take it anyway. The thought was a venomous snake, coiling in my gut. No, he wouldn't. He couldn't. Not $32,000. Not our entire future. I stumbled back to my car, my legs feeling like they were made of cotton. My hands shook so badly I could barely fit the key into the ignition. I drove home on autopilot, my mind a chaotic whirlwind of numbers and accusations. The familiar streets of our neighborhood looked alien, distorted. A dog barked. A child on a bicycle swerved in front of me, and I barely registered them. All I could see was that bank balance, a single digit and 2 pennies. I burst through the door of our apartment. David. He was sitting on the couch, laptop open, working. He looked up, startled by my frantic entrance. Ames, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. The money, I gasped, struggling to catch my breath. David, the money is gone. He blinked, confused. What money? What are you talking about? The house money, our savings. It's gone. All of it. I threw my purse and keys onto the floor, my whole body trembling. I just went to the ATM to get some cash, and I checked the balance. It's $7. David, $7.14. He stared at me, his brow furrowed. A flicker of concern crossed his face, but it was quickly replaced by a look of placating reason. Okay, honey, calm down. It's probably just a system glitch. Sometimes the ATM network goes down. Did you try checking it online? No. I came straight home. I cried, my voice bordering on hysterical. It's not a glitch. The receipt says $7.14. Okay, he said, holding up his hands in a calming gesture that only infuriated me more. He closed his laptop and set it aside. Let me check. I'm sure it's fine. I watched, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. As he pulled up the banking website, he typed in my username, then paused. What's the new password you set? Sunshine dash to the dash question dash mark? Before Brenda is a witch 8. I rattled off, the ridiculous password I'd created in a fit of paranoid anger now sounding pathetic. He typed it in slowly, carefully. The page loaded. We both leaned in, staring at the screen, and there it was, in crisp, undeniable digital font. Savings account, $7,852. Available balance, $7.14. David's face went pale. He clicked on the account history. His movements suddenly jerky and panicked. His calm, logical demeanor shattered, replaced by the same raw fear that was consuming me. "What the hell?" he whispered, scrolling down the page. And then we saw it. A single transaction, dated 2 days ago. Online transfer to Chase checking. $4,130, $32. $443.00. What is that? I whispered, my voice barely audible. What is account $4,130? I don't know that account. David was silent. His face was a mask of dawning horror. He knew. I could see in his eyes that he knew exactly what that account was. "David," I said, my voice rising, sharp and demanding. "Whose account is that?" He wouldn't look at me. He just stared at the screen, his jaw working silently. "David, look at me. Whose account is it?" I screamed, grabbing his arm. He finally turned to face me, and a look in his eyes broke my heart all over again. It was a mixture of guilt, shame, and utter disbelief. "It's my mother's," he whispered. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. I stumbled back, my hand flying to my mouth. Brenda. It was her. The phone call about online banking. The innocent questions about passwords. The prying into our mail. It had all been reconnaissance. She had been gathering intelligence, planning her attack. How? I choked out. How could she do this? She needed my password. She needed my security questions. David's face crumpled. He looked down at his hands, unable to meet my gaze. "The password, your old one. It was our anniversary date, wasn't it?" I nodded numbly. "And the security questions?" He continued, his voice thick with shame. "What was your first pet's name? What city were your parents married in?" "Spotty and Pittsburgh," I whispered. "The answer's automatic." He closed his eyes. "She knows all that," he said. "She was there when I gave you that puppy. She helped my dad plan my parents' wedding. She had everything she needed. She had known the answers to my life better than I realized. She had used our shared history, the intimate details of our lives, as a key to unlock our future and steal it." The initial shock began to recede, replaced by a wave of pure, unadulterated rage. It was a fury so intense it made my vision swim. But my anger wasn't just for Brenda. It was for the man sitting in front of me. "You defended her," I said, my voice low and shaking with anger. "You told me I was paranoid. You told me I was making it all up, that she was just an old woman making conversation. You let this happen. Amy." "I didn't know," he started, his voice pleading. "You didn't want to know." I shot back, jabbing a finger at him. "I told you. I warned you. I told you she was after our money, that she was dangerous. And you told me I was selfish. You took her side, every single time. You left the door wide open for her, and she just walked right in and took everything." "I'll fix this," he said, scrambling for his phone. "I'll call her right now. I'll get it back. It's just a misunderstanding. She can't have spent it already." But I knew better. Brenda wasn't the type to take money and let it sit. It was already gone. I could feel it. The car for Kevin. The investment opportunity she'd probably dreamed up. This wasn't a loan in her mind. It was a repossession. She was taking back what she believed was rightfully hers. David's initial attempts to call her went straight to voicemail. He tried Kevin's phone. It rang once, then disconnected. They were avoiding him. Of course, they were. They had the money. They had won. "They're not answering," he said, his voice laced with a panic I had never heard from him before. He was finally seeing the truth, but it was far too late. "Of course they're not answering. David," I said, my voice cold and hard. I felt strangely calm, the kind of calm that comes when the absolute worst thing you can imagine has just happened. The adrenaline had burned out, leaving behind a core of icy resolve. What did you expect? That she'd pick up and say, "Oops, my mistake"? He started pacing the small living room, running his hands through his hair. "This is a mistake. It has to be. My mother, she wouldn't do this. Not really. She wouldn't steal from us." His denial, even now, with the proof glowing on the laptop screen, was breathtaking. His entire life had been built around the belief that his mother was a saint, a loving matriarch. The idea that she was a common thief, a calculating manipulator, was a truth his mind simply could not accept. But I could. I had seen it all along. "Stop it," I said, my voice sharp enough to make him freeze. "Stop defending her. Stop making excuses. Your mother is a thief. She stole our life savings. She stole our house with the blue door. And you know what the worst part is? She did it because you let her. You showed her, time and time again, that there were no consequences." Tears were streaming down my face now, hot and angry. "I'm going over there," I said, grabbing my keys from the floor. "Amy, wait," he said, reaching for me. "Let's just calm down. We can call the bank. We can." I pulled my arm away from his touch. "No, I'm not calming down. And I'm not waiting for you to handle this. Because we both know you won't. I am going to get our money back, or I am going to watch the world burn trying." I turned and walked out the door, not waiting to see if he would follow. The time for discussion was over. The time for begging and pleading was over. This was no longer a family squabble. It was a crime scene, and I was going to confront the person who did it. The 20-minute drive to Brenda's house felt like an eternity. Every red light was a personal insult. Every slow driver a conspirator in her plot. My anger had solidified into a cold, hard diamond in my chest. I wasn't crying anymore. My hands were steady on the steering wheel, my vision sharp and focused. I was a nurse. I was trained to handle emergencies, to triage, to act decisively under pressure. And this was the biggest emergency of my life. David did follow me. He drove his own car, trailing a few feet behind, a silent, grim shadow. I knew he was terrified, not of his mother, not of the confrontation, but of the final, irreversible implosion of his world. He was driving toward the moment where the two women in his life would finally force him to choose, and he knew he would fail the test. I pulled up to the curb in front of the small brick rancher he'd grown up in. The lawn was neatly manicured, the flower beds bursting with a riot of late-season mums. It looked so peaceful, so deceptively normal. But as I got closer, I saw it. Parked in the driveway, gleaming under the afternoon sun, was a slightly used, dark blue sedan. It had a giant red bow stuck to the windshield, the kind you see in cheesy holiday commercials. Kevin's car, the sight of it, so smug and triumphant, sent a fresh wave of rage through me. She'd done it. She had taken our dream and turned it into a used car for her deadbeat son. I didn't even wait for David to park. I strode up the walkway and pounded on the front door, my fist striking the wood with a force that made my knuckles ache. I didn't care. The door opened a crack, and Kevin's face appeared. The smug look from the dinner table was gone, replaced by a flash of panic when he saw me. He tried to slam the door shut, but I was faster. I shoved my shoulder into it, forcing it open, and pushed my way inside. "Where is she?" I demanded, my voice a low growl. "She's not here," he stammered, backing away from me. He couldn't meet my eyes. "Don't you lie to me." "Kevin," I snarled. "I saw the car. Where is your mother? What's all the commotion?" Brenda's voice sailed in from the kitchen. She appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on an apron, a theatrical picture of domestic innocence. Her eyes widened in mock surprise when she saw me. "Amelia." "David. What a surprise. I wasn't expecting you." David had come in behind me, and now stood awkwardly by the door, looking like a lost child. I ignored her pleasantries. I walked right up to her until we were inches apart, forcing her to look me in the eye. "You have $32,450 that belongs to me," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "I want it back. Now." Brenda's mask of surprise didn't slip. but a flicker of something cold and hard passed through her eyes. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play dumb with me, I said, my voice rising. You transferred every cent out of my savings account 2 days ago. You stole our down payment. You stole our house. She finally dropped the act. The fake smile vanished, replaced by a look of defiance. She crossed her arms over her chest. I didn't steal anything. I reallocated family resources. The sheer audacity of the phrase took my breath away. Reallocated family resources? Are you kidding me? You committed a felony. Brenda, it's not a felony to help your own children. She shot back, her voice dripping with self-righteousness. I saw how you were, hoarding that money like a dragon, letting your own brother-in-law struggle. David was too weak to stand up to you. So I did what a mother has to do. I made the right decision for the family. David finally found his voice, though it was weak and trembling. Mom, you can't do this. That was Amy's money. Our money. You have to give it back. Oh, David, don't be so dramatic, she said, waving a dismissive hand at him. It's an investment. I bought Kevin his car, starts a new job on Monday. By the way, so he can finally get his life together. And the rest, it's for a wonderful opportunity. What opportunity? I demanded, a sick feeling growing in my stomach. My friend Margaret's son-in-law has a startup, a vitamin company. It's the next big thing, he says. Ground floor. He needed investors, and I got us in. In a year, that money will be doubled, even tripled. Then you can have your precious house. See, I'm helping you. You should be thanking me. It was a pyramid scheme, a multi-level marketing scam. I could hear it in the vague, buzzword-filled description. My 5 years of double shifts, of scrimping and saving, had been invested in a get-rich-quick scheme by a woman who probably got her financial advice from Facebook. You gave our money away, I whispered, the rage momentarily eclipsed by sheer, horrified disbelief. You gave our life savings to some stranger for a vitamin company? He's not a stranger. He's Margaret's son-in-law, she said defensively. And it's a smart move. You're just too short-sighted to see it. I want the money back. Brenda, I repeated, my voice now flat and devoid of all emotion. Whatever is left. I want you to call Margaret's son-in-law and get it back. And I want the money you spent on that car. Kevin can sell it. I don't care. I want it all. A nasty smile spread across her face. I'm afraid that's not possible. The investment is locked in for a year, and the car is in Kevin's name. It's his property. She looked past me, directly at David. This is for the best. Son, one day you'll see that your mother knows what's right. That's when something inside me snapped. The last thread of civility, of trying to reason with an unreasonable person, just broke. I pulled out my phone. What are you doing? Brenda asked, her voice sharp with alarm. I'm calling the police, I said calmly, my thumb hovering over the numbers 911. I'm going to tell them that you illegally accessed my bank account and stole over $30,000. It's called wire fraud. It's a federal crime. Brenda's face went white. Even Kevin, who had been silently watching from the corner, took a nervous step forward. You wouldn't, Brenda whispered. Watch me, I said. Amelia. No, David cried, lunging forward and grabbing my arm. Don't, please. She's my mother. We can't send her to jail. I looked at him, at his desperate, pleading face, and I felt nothing but contempt. He was still protecting her. Even now, after everything she had done, his first instinct was to shield her from the consequences. She's a criminal. David, I said, trying to pull my arm free. She belongs in jail. It's a family matter. Brenda shrieked, her composure finally cracking. The police won't do anything. You'll just embarrass yourself. Let's find out, I said, and pressed the call button. A calm, professional voice answered. 911. What's your emergency? I'd like to report a theft, I said, my voice steady. My eyes locked on Brenda's horrified face. A grand larceny. My mother-in-law, Brenda Hayes, has stolen $32,000 from my bank account. I gave the dispatcher the address. She told me a car was on its way. When I hung up, the silence in the room was absolute. Brenda stared at me, her mouth hanging open, a look of pure hatred in her eyes. Kevin looked like he was about to be sick. And David just looked at me with a profound, soul-deep sadness, as if I were the one who had betrayed him. "I can't believe you did that," he whispered. "I can't believe you would do that to our family." "She did this to our family?" "David," I corrected him. "I'm just cleaning up the mess." We stood there in a frozen tableau of misery and anger, waiting for the sound of sirens. I didn't know what the police would do. I didn't know if they could even help. But I knew one thing for sure. The war was no longer silent. The battle lines were drawn, and I had just fired the first real shot. I had taken our private, painful family drama and dragged it out into the light. There was no going back now. The sirens were a distant wail at first, a faint cry that grew steadily louder, closer, until it was a piercing shriek that filled the quiet suburban street. The sound seemed to suck all the air out of the room. Brenda, who had been glaring at me with silent fury, suddenly deflated. The color drained from her face, and her defiant posture crumbled. She looked, for the first time, like a scared old woman. Kevin just stared at the front door as if he could will the police away through sheer panic. David, however, was a mess of agitated energy. He paced the small living room, running his hands through his hair, his face a mask of anguish. "Amelia, we can still fix this," he pleaded in a harsh whisper. "Just tell them it was a misunderstanding, a mistake. We can hang up before they get here." "No," I said, my voice as hard as stone. I didn't move from my spot in the center of the room. I felt strangely calm, detached. I had set a tidal wave in motion, and now all I could do was wait for it to crash. The doorbell rang, a sharp, authoritative chime that made everyone jump. Two police officers, a man and a woman, stood on the doorstep. They were younger than I expected, their faces professional but cautious. "We had a call about a domestic dispute." "A theft?" the male officer asked, his eyes scanning the tense faces in the room. "Yes, officer," I said, stepping forward. "I made the call. My mother-in-law, Brenda Hayes, has stolen over $32,000 from my personal savings account." Brenda immediately burst into tears. It wasn't the quiet, pained weeping of a grieving woman. It was a loud, theatrical wail, designed for maximum effect. She staggered forward, clutching her chest, and leaned heavily on David for support. "Oh, David, tell them it isn't true," she sobbed, burying her face in his shoulder. "Tell them what a wicked, lying girl she is. Steal? I've never stolen a thing in my life. I was only trying to help my family." The officers exchanged a look. It was a look I recognized from the Hospital Weary, seen it all before expression of people who deal with messy human drama every single day. The female officer addressed me, her voice gentle but firm. "Ma'am, can you explain exactly what happened?" I laid it out for them, my voice calm and factual. I explained the separate account, the online transfer, the sudden appearance of the new car in the driveway. I told them how Brenda had admitted to taking the money, claiming it was an investment. The male officer then turned to Brenda, who was still clinging to David, her body racked with sobs. "Ma'am, is this true? Did you transfer money from your daughter-in-law's account without her permission?" "Permission?" Brenda wailed, looking up at him with tear-filled, innocent eyes. "We're family. I didn't think I needed permission to help my own son. David and I have always shared everything. I thought it was his money too. It was a simple misunderstanding. She's always been so secretive about money, so controlling. I was just trying to do something nice for my boys." It was a brilliant performance. She painted herself as a naive, loving mother, a technologically inept widow who didn't understand the complexities of modern banking. She painted me as a greedy, controlling wife, the kind of woman who would call the police on her own family over a simple mistake. I could see the narrative shifting. The officers' faces softened with a hint of sympathy. This wasn't a clear-cut case of theft anymore. It was a messy, he said she said family squabble. Do you have any proof that she wasn't authorized to access the account? The female officer asked me. Did she forge a signature? Is there anything in writing? No, I admitted, my heart sinking. It was all online. She must have guessed my old password and security questions. But David can tell you. He was there. He heard her admit it. All eyes turned to David. This was it. The moment of truth. The culmination of years of his weakness. His avoidance. His refusal to draw a line in the sand. Here he was, with the law standing in his living room, with his wife on one side and his weeping mother on the other. He had to choose. He looked at me. His eyes filled with a desperate, pleading agony. Then he looked at his mother, whose sobs had quieted to a pathetic, hopeful whimper. He took a deep breath. It's complicated, he said, his voice barely a whisper. My mom, she gets confused sometimes. I think she genuinely thought she was helping. I don't think she understood that it was separate. The betrayal was so swift, so absolute. It knocked the wind out of me. He didn't defend me. He didn't even tell the truth. He equivocated. He made excuses for her. He took the knife that was already in my back and twisted it. The male officer sighed, closing his notebook. Okay, here's the situation, he said, directing his words to me. What we have here is a family dispute over money, without concrete evidence of criminal intent like a forged check or a threatening email. It's very difficult for us to press charges. This is essentially a civil matter. Your best bet would be to take her to small claims court. A civil matter. My life savings. My future. The foundation of my marriage will reduce to a bureaucratic headache. A case to be argued over in a stuffy courtroom months from now. So you're not going to do anything? I asked, my voice trembling with disbelief. Our hands are tied. Ma'am, the officer said, his tone apologetic but final. We can't arrest a woman for what looks, on the surface, like a misunderstanding between family members. We recommend you try to work it out amongst yourselves or contact a lawyer. They gave us a pamphlet on domestic dispute resolution, offered to stay until things calmed down, and then they left. I watched through the window as their cruiser pulled away from the curb, taking with it my last shred of hope. The moment the door clicked shut, Brenda's tears vanished. She straightened up, pulling away from David, and fixed me with a look of pure, triumphant hatred. She had won. She had played the victim, manipulated the police, and used her own son's weakness as a shield. She had gotten away with it. I turned to David, my heart a cold, dead weight in my chest. How could you? I whispered. You just stood there and lied for her. I didn't lie, he said, his voice defensive and shrill. I didn't tell them the whole story. What did you want me to do, Amy? Have them put my own mother in handcuffs? Drag her down to the station? Yes, I screamed, the last of my control shattering. That is exactly what I wanted. I wanted, for once in your life, for you to stand up for what is right, to stand up for me, for us. But you couldn't do it. You chose her. You always choose her. I looked from his cowardly face to Brenda's smug one, to Kevin's relieved smirk, and in that instant, I realized I had lost everything. It wasn't just the money. The money was gone, and I would probably never see it again. It wasn't just the house with the blue door. That was a dream that had turned to ash. What I had truly lost was my husband. The man I had loved and trusted, the man I had planned a life with, was a stranger to me. He was his mother's son before he was my husband, and he had just proven, in the most brutal way imaginable, that he would never change. I was alone, completely and utterly alone. The savings were gone. The law wouldn't help me, and the man who was supposed to be my partner had just publicly sided with the person who had destroyed our life. The fight was over. I had lost. I didn't say another word. I turned my back on all of them, on the wreckage of my marriage, and walked out the front door. I got in my car and drove, with no destination in mind. I just drove. the tears I had held back for so long finally streaming down my face, blurring the road ahead into a meaningless smear of light and color. I drove for hours, the suburban streets melting into the glowing ribbons of the highway. I had no destination. I was just running. Each mile I put between myself and that house was a small, hollow victory. The tears eventually dried on my cheeks, leaving them stiff and salty. The fiery rage and the gut-wrenching betrayal cooled into a vast, empty numbness. It was the kind of emotional exhaustion that follows a trauma, a self-preservation mode where feeling anything at all is simply too costly. My phone buzzed relentlessly in the cup holder. Dozens of calls from David. A few texts. "Amy, where are you? Please come home. We need to talk." Then, later, "I'm so sorry. Please just let me know you're safe." I ignored them all. Home. I didn't have a home anymore. The apartment we had shared, the life we had built within its walls, felt contaminated, like a crime scene I could never return to. Talk. There was nothing left to say. He had said everything he needed to say when he stood in that living room and protected his mother instead of his wife. Eventually, the numbness gave way to a sliver of practicality. I couldn't drive forever. I needed a place to go, a place to think. The idea of going back to our apartment was suffocating. The thought of facing David, of seeing the pity and guilt in his eyes, was more than I could bear. There was only one person I could think of. I called Sarah, a senior nurse I worked with at the hospital. She was in her 50s, twice divorced, with a no-nonsense attitude and a surprisingly kind heart. She picked up on the second ring. "Amy, it's almost midnight. Are you okay?" My voice broke when I tried to speak. "No." I managed to choke out. "Sarah, can I come over? I have nowhere else to go." She didn't ask any questions. She just said, "My door is always open. Come on." When I arrived at her small, tidy condo, she took one look at my tear-streaked face and swollen eyes and simply wrapped me in a hug. It was the first moment of genuine human comfort I'd had all day, and I collapsed against her, sobbing out the whole sordid story: the car, the savings, the vitamins, the police, David's betrayal. She listened patiently, making me a cup of tea and letting me talk until I was hoarse. "He's a coward," she said, her voice devoid of judgment but full of certainty. When I had finished, "And his mother is a viper. You can stay here as long as you need. The guest room is all yours." That night, I slept for 10 hours, a deep, dreamless, and utterly exhausted sleep. When I woke up, the morning light filtering through the blinds felt harsh and unforgiving. The reality of my situation came crashing back down on me. I had $7 to my name. My life savings were gone. My marriage was in ruins. I was 30 years old, sleeping on a colleague's sofa bed, with nothing to show for the last 5 years of my life but a broken heart and a profound sense of failure. I spent the next few days in a fog. I called out sick from work, something I almost never did. I couldn't face the cheerful chaos of the pediatric ward, the innocent faces of the children, the well-meaning questions from my co-workers. Sarah was a quiet, comforting presence. She'd leave food for me, check in to make sure I was okay, but otherwise gave me the space I so desperately needed. David continued to call and text, his messages growing more desperate. "Amy, please. I know I messed up. I was scared. I've never seen my mom like that. Let me make it right. Make it right," I thought, staring at the message with a bitter laugh. How could he possibly make this right? Could he magically get the money back from the vitamin scam? Could he rewind time and find the courage he'd lacked his entire life? No. The damage was done. The trust was shattered into a million irreparable pieces. On the third day, I finally replied to him. A single, simple text: "I'm safe. I'm staying with a friend. I need space." His reply was instantaneous. "Okay. I understand. I love you." The words "I love you" felt hollow, meaningless. Love wasn't just a feeling. It was an action. It was showing up. It was defending. It was choosing your partner, again and again. especially when it was hard. He had failed every test, living without the constant, low-grade stress of dealing with Brenda, and David's weakness was like taking off a pair of shoes that were 2 sizes too small. The relief was immense, but my feet were still bruised and sore. I began to realize just how much of my energy, my emotional bandwidth, had been consumed by managing their toxic dynamic. I had been so focused on building our future that I hadn't realized our present was built on a foundation of sand. Sarah's quiet condo became my sanctuary. It was a space free of judgment, free of manipulation, free of the suffocating weight of family obligation. For the first time in years, the only person I had to worry about was myself. And in that quiet, a new feeling began to emerge, pushing through the layers of grief and anger. It was a flicker of resolve. Brenda had taken my money. David had broken my trust. But they could not take my strength. They could not take my skills. I was a good nurse. I was a hard worker. I had built that savings account once. From nothing. Maybe, just maybe, I could do it again. But this time, it would be for me. Only for me. This realization was a turning point. The fog of despair began to lift, replaced by a cold, clear-eyed determination. The dream of the little brick house with the blue door was dead. I had to mourn it, but I couldn't let it bury me. I had to build a new dream, one that wasn't dependent on anyone else. Meanwhile, David was living in the wreckage he had helped create. I could only imagine the suffocating silence of our apartment, every object a reminder of me, of the life we had lost. I imagined his phone calls with his mother. Was she still triumphant? Was she comforting him, telling him he was better off without the difficult, money-obsessed wife who had tried to put her in jail? One evening, about a week after I had left, David showed up at Sarah's condo. Sarah answered the door, blocking his entry. "She doesn't want to see you, David," she said, her voice firm. "Please," he begged, his voice raw. He looked terrible. He hadn't shaved, and his eyes were red-rimmed and haunted. "Just for 5 minutes. I need to talk to her." I was standing in the hallway, listening, my heart a painful knot in my chest. Part of me wanted to slam the door in his face, but another part, a part one hated, felt a pang of pity for the broken man on the doorstep. I stepped forward. "It's okay, Sarah," I said quietly. "I'll talk to him." We sat on the small patio, the cool night air a buffer between us. He didn't try to touch me. He just sat there, looking at his hands, for a long, agonizing minute. "It's worse than I thought," he finally said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "The money, it's all gone." I stayed silent, waiting. "I went to see my mom," he continued. I screamed at her. I think it's the first time I've ever really yelled at her in my life. I demanded she get the money back from that investment. She called the guy. He's gone. His phone is disconnected. The website is down. It was a scam. Just like you said. Margaret is devastated. She lost her retirement savings. My mother, she just keeps saying it's not her fault." He looked up at me, his eyes swimming with tears. "And Kevin, he crashed the car. He was showing off to his friends, took a turn too fast, and slammed it into a telephone pole. The car is totaled. He's fine. Just a few bruises. But the insurance, Mom only got the minimum liability. It won't cover the damage." I felt a dizzying wave of something that wasn't quite satisfaction, but a grim, cosmic sense of justice. It was a disaster of their own making. A perfect storm of greed, stupidity, and entitlement. "She hasn't learned a thing," David whispered, as if reading my mind. "She blames you. She blames the vitamin guy. She blames Kevin for being reckless. She doesn't see that she caused all of this, and she expects me to fix it. She wants me to co-sign a loan to pay for the damages to the pole." He finally looked me straight in the eye, and the depth of his despair was bottomless. "Living in the apartment alone, seeing all your things, it's hell. But the real hell is realizing that you were right. You were right about everything. About her, about Kevin, about me. I was so busy trying to keep the peace that I let her burn our whole world down. and I was the one who handed her the matches. It was the first time he had taken real, undiluted responsibility. There were no excuses, no justifications, just the raw, ugly truth. He had seen the monster behind his mother's mask, and the sight had broken him. My anger towards him softened, not into forgiveness, but into a profound, weary sadness for the man he could have been, for the marriage we could have had. If only he had found this clarity sooner. I listened to his confession, letting the words hang in the cool night air. For the first time, he wasn't asking me for anything. He wasn't begging me to come home or asking me to forgive him. He was just stating the facts, laying the pieces of his shattered world at my feet. The anger that had been my constant companion for the past week began to dissolve, leaving behind an aching void. "What are you going to do?" I asked, my voice neutral. It wasn't a question about us. It was a question about him. For the first time, I was genuinely curious to see what he would do when faced with a choice. Now that his illusions were gone, he shook his head, a gesture of profound weariness. I told her no. He said quietly. I told her I wouldn't co-sign the loan. I told her that was her mess, and Kevin's mess, and they would have to find their own way to clean it up. I told her I had to try and clean up mine. He paused, taking a shaky breath. "She called me a traitor. She said you had poisoned me against my own family. And you know what?" I told her she was right. "You didn't poison me, Amy. You tried to give me the antidote. I was just too stupid to take it." This was the moment, the confrontation he had avoided his entire life. He had finally stood up to her. Not for me, not under pressure, but for himself. He had finally drawn a line. It was too late to save our past, but I wondered if it was enough to give him a future. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper and a car key. He slid them across the patio table toward me. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't deserve it, but I had to do something. I had to start." I unfolded the paper. It was a bill of sale. He had sold his car, the one he loved, the one he spent his weekends polishing and maintaining. The key was for my car. He had paid it off completely with the money. It wasn't $32,000. It wasn't even close, but it was everything he had. "The apartment lease is up in 2 months. He continued. "I'm not renewing it. I'm going to find a cheap room to rent somewhere. I'm taking on every freelance project I can get. It's going to take me years, Amy, but I am going to pay you back, every single cent, whether you come back to me or not. This is my debt, my responsibility." He stood up, his shoulders slumped. He looked like a man who had lost everything, but in his eyes, there was a flicker of something new, a quiet strength, a grim determination I had never seen before. He had lost his mother's approval, his wife, his home, but he had found his spine. "That's all I wanted to say," he whispered. "I'll leave you alone now." He turned and walked away without looking back. I sat there for a long time, staring at the bill of sale and the paid-off car key. It wasn't the money that mattered. It was the action. It was the sacrifice. It was the first selfless, decisive thing he had done for me, for us, without needing to be pushed. I didn't move back in with him. The wounds were too deep, the trust too thoroughly incinerated. But I agreed to see him. We started with coffee in public places, awkward and stilted. Then, slowly, we moved on to walks in the park, talking for hours. He never once asked me to come back. He just talked about the changes he was making. He was seeing a therapist, learning about boundaries and enmeshment. He showed me the budget he'd created, the aggressive payment plan he'd set up to start replenishing my savings account. He was rebuilding himself from the ground up, not for me, but for himself. And in doing so, he was becoming the man I had always hoped he could be. His relationship with his mother was shattered. She would call him, weeping and accusing, and he would calmly state his boundaries and end the conversation. Kevin, faced with the real-world consequences of his actions for the first time, had been forced to get a minimum wage job to start paying off his debts. The gravitational pull of the Hayes family dysfunction was finally starting to weaken. Months turned into a year. The little brick house with the blue door was sold to another family. I saw the sold sign on Zillow, and it only brought a faint pang of sadness, like a memory from a different lifetime. My dream had changed. It was no longer about a specific house. It was about a specific feeling, security, peace, a home built not on brick and mortar, but on a foundation of unwavering trust and mutual respect. One crisp autumn afternoon, David and I were standing in front of a small, unassuming rental house in a different neighborhood. It was smaller than the one we had dreamed of. The paint was peeling in a few places, and the front door was a faded, boring white. "It's not much," he said quietly, nervously jingling the keys in his hand. I looked at him. He was different now. The haunted look was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence. He had paid back a surprising amount of the money, his discipline unwavering. But more importantly, he had shown up, consistently, for an entire year. He had proven his change through action, not words. The chasm between us had slowly, painfully, started to close. I was thinking, I said, a small smile playing on my lips. "We could paint the door." He looked at me, his eyes wide with a fragile, hopeful light. "Yeah. What color?" "I don't know," I said, taking his hand. It felt warm, and strong, and right. Maybe something new. We hadn't magically fixed everything. There were still scars. There were still moments of doubt. But we were building something new, something more honest. We had lost our savings, our innocence, and the easy love we once had. But in its place, we had found something harder and more resilient. We had learned that a home isn't a place you buy, but a commitment you build every single day, with honesty, courage, and a can of paint for a plain white door. We walked up the path together, ready to begin.